In Mormonism, the annual tithing settlement is a chance to meet your local bishop and declare how much you've given back to the church. Emily was a full tither for decades, meaning someone who gave the expected 10% of their income. But when she was caught lying about her tithe in 2019, church leadership gently threatened to take away her temple recommend. To let you know what a big deal this was, the temple recommend is a document that allows members in good standing to participate in closed services. Baptisms for the dead, initiations, confirmations, etc. The bishop can choose to give you leeway on a case-by-case basis. A Redditor named Andy, for example, stopped paying his full tithe when his family fell in hard times. His bishop took away his temple recommend, which meant Andy couldn't bless the new baby or baptize his daughter. Emily, who was caught by the bishop, tried to explain she had instead given to other charities, cancer research last month, and to a children's hospital a few months before that. In the end, Emily was allowed to keep her temple recommend, on the condition she would volunteer her spare time working in the church's thrift store to compensate for the church's loss of her income. That was also the experience of Eliza, who published her tithing rebellion on Business Insider. Eliza and her husband were making about $10 an hour. Her husband, a military vet, was also working his way through school back before the GI Bill was amended in 2009. When the bishop asked why they weren't full tithers, Eliza claimed financial hardship. So the church gave them the same ultimatum: volunteer in the church store to catch up on tithe or have the temple recommend revoked. Jana Reese from Religion News also rebelled against the tithe. After the Washington Post published financial leaks including the church's massive stock portfolios, she didn't feel so bad about lying. LDS Church holds a $100 billion stock portfolio entirely built off the flock's tithing. 10% isn't just LDS tithe either. Across denominations, 10% seems to be the standard. Even the word tithe in Hebrew means 10% or 1/10. Baked into the word itself is a standard which churches think we should give. But like all things, there are exceptions. If you're a traditional church, 10% is enough to build your nest egg over a course of several decades. But if you're Judith Smith from the Washington Mega Church, Kenneth Copeland from Eagle Mountain Mega Church, or Ed Young, the TV evangelist, you need to get creative. Like forcing your employees into compulsory 10%, taking private jets to collect tithe on 7 different continents, or telling your mega church, quote, "If you can't tithe, don't come back."
What if I discovered that 80% of you were pathological liars? I would talk about the tithe. 80% of you are robbing God. I gotta ask you, serious, why are you even coming to church if you're not bringing the tithe? Seriously, what are you expecting?
Or heaven forbid, producing a tithe rap like the New Hope West, who was worried not everyone got the 10% message.
But listen up now to what I gotta say. What I do every Friday when I get my pay. Before I buy the groceries or pay the rent, oh, I gotta give God his full 10%.
You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet.
The average taxpayer forfeits a little over 10% of their income. In return, we expect to have our roads rebuilt, schools kept up to date to educate our children, civil order, and protection from foreign invasion. To quote Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilized society. In church, we also give 10% of our income. In return, the church does what? Local churches give back to neighborhoods by providing food for the needy or after-school programs for kids. But what do mega churches rebuild? Do they provide a service to the community outside of the sermon? What if you're not one of the faithful? Are they considered a public good? How do they earn their all-important tax-exempt status? That's our episode focused for today, and it comes with 3 little myths bearing 3 little gifts. Myth 1. Megachurch pastors give peace of mind to thousands, and you can't put a price on peace of mind, except we're definitely going to try. Myth 2. Canned food drives, bake sales, and car washes are the best tools for charitable church. But if you're sending $12,000 to a celebrity pastor on TV, how does the church allocate your money? Myth 3. If megachurches are tax-free and offer peace of mind to any and all Americans, then why are so many of them risking their 501c3 status to push a political message? Does God not listen to all parties equally? If a libertarian prays and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? We're going to get to our myths. But first, I want to tell Joe about my experience working with megachurches.
So we had a episode about the Mark Hill Church. So
Mars Hill show up in Seattle.
Yeah, Mars Hill. Thank you. We've done episodes about church before on slightly different levels, and we've talked about ego and corruption. But why are we focusing on mega churches specifically today?
I grew up going to a small Presbyterian church. My mom has taught Sunday school for every week for 48 years. So this is something I've been in, and as an adult, I've decided to go away from the 100 people churches to the mega churches. I just find the services and the sermons just so much more engaging. But you can't help but see what kind of a show it is. You know, Joe.
The circus.
It really does. And if I say anything like that at the mega church I go to now, of course I get all my church friends get very offended. And I'm like, you can't see what a dog and pony show this is sometimes.
Well, I wonder, are those the friends that have been going to, mega church for a long time?
Most of them are like me. They grew up in a smaller church, and then when they got older and they start with their family, they just find it more engaging.
Okay.
It's very more attractive to probably younger people, I'd say, and I think younger churchgoers in their 30s and 40s, right? I think that because they make so many things for children, they make them, with the daycare and the child services and the church camps. They really are trying to attract the family people.
Right. I kind of want to define what we mean by mega church before we get into this, and also kind of separate like 2 buckets. We have your regular neighborhood church, which they have their tax exemption. My focus, by the way, yours will probably be moral. My focus is, do churches deserve their tax exemption? That's like the bottom line for me. But we have neighborhood churches who do canned food drives, who do outreach, who help the homeless. They have all of these things that you've participated in. I've heard you talk about volunteering for these services. And on the other side is mega churches. And you get a whole different experience and a whole lot of different benefits from it by the community. Am I correct in saying that is basically what our episode is about?
Yeah, you're 100% dead on. And I like the money approach that you have because, money we can measure. In the intro, we're talking about peace of mind.
Yeah.
People are only happy I think happiness is temporary, right? It wears off. It's like motivation. It wears off. You got to keep reapplying.
And when we talk small neighborhood churches, we absolutely do not mean small neighborhood celebrity tax shelter churches. Apparently Mel Brooks and the Kardashians own these little like family owned churches that only allow certain people to come, and they just use them because they are tax free, and they kind of put money into them because they're exempt.
I have noticed it from my mega church volunteering that I notice that smaller churches actually do more good things, and the mega churches talk a lot about how much they do. It's kind of like I kind of think of like that monkey that's clasping those things together, making we do so much for the community, but if you really start digging and looking for examples of it, there's not a lot. Most of the activities are for the church to bring to the church so that people will give.
Right. So let's start by coming to Jesus, I suppose. I come from a traditionally an Irish Catholic family. I myself am agnostic, but I want to reveal how much we tithed, and I want you to reveal how much you tithe, Todd, if you're willing.
I'm in.
Okay. I'll start. When my family was going to church, I come from a very poor family. Most of my family would tithe basically whatever was in their wallet left over from their work week. And the church, if they were going to a church that knew them, they would kind of like, they would get a talking to. Like there were a couple of churches I remember where like they would pull my mother aside and be like, you are tithing, like thank you for giving. They would start with being gracious. They actually would. They'd say thank you for giving. Next time if you can live a good life and get your finances straight, we would appreciate, closer to 10%. My grandmother on the other side of my family, she did not tithe. Instead, she would buy anything the church offered her. She had, when she passed, she had hundreds of tiny church figurines. She had paintings, like she had a Thomas Kincaid painting and like paintings by the local church. She wanted something physical to show that she had been like quote unquote giving, even though a lot of times these went to individuals.
That's crazy. I can't believe they would pull something aside. When I was married, my first time, and my first wife was a devout Christian and read the Bible every day, and we'd give over 10%, but 10% was the bare minimum. And we belonged to multiple churches. We gave at multiple churches, but that wasn't my call. But that wasn't negotiable, Joe. There's no way it was going to go under 10%. It was way over that. And she was ethnic. She was Korean, so she was part of a smaller church too. And tithing's very important there because your money directly affects everything, whether the boat sinks or not. So I think that it's not really a pressure from the government or the church or the pastors or the pastoral staff. I think it's social pressure from the other members of the church. And I know that there's status in it. So if you do have a high income and you do give more money, well, guess what? You get more say and you get more power.
Oh, absolutely. A vivid memory of mine is not somebody being pulled aside angrily and being told to tithe like our narrative opening. Our narrative is about the LDS church. There's depending on your denomination, you may get pulled aside by a bishop or deacon or something like that and warned to tithe more. What I remember most vividly is the church doing a fundraising. And, if you were feeling the Holy Spirit and you were excited and, the basket went around, you pulled out money and everybody could see how much you pulled out because that basket is in full view. And there was status in it. There absolutely was.
Well, I was going to a mega church in Phoenix called Christ Church of the Valley. It's called CCV. And they have some really, really cool branding things I'm going to share with you. The first one is at all their services, the very first thing they say at every of their services, our services are only 1 hour exactly. And they are to the second. Now, so what's the importance of this? Well, people want to know that. They want it short, compact. No matter how good a speech is, a stand-up comedy is, a sermon is. Aren't we glad when it's over, Joe? Aren't we ready to,
We want to be short and sweet, and we want to be timed.
And church can kind of drag on. So they make a point of that. Well, that's really made their membership flourish. They also have a neat thing where they put CCV on cars. They have these bumper stickers, and they're everywhere. And they even tell the members, they say, if you get in trouble in a neighborhood, go to a church, go to a door that has one of those. But it's spread like fire. It's almost clicky, colty, gangy. You know what I mean? And they are so good at doing fundraisers. I remember one in general. They're building churches in Colombia. And it was a big deal, and they showed the pastors flying in on helicopters and meeting these people in the country. It was really over the top, you know. And I'll never forget what the guy said, who was trying to raise money to pay for all this. You know, of course, they're on helicopters and jets, and they're building churches in other countries. It's kind of weird, right? You know what I mean? We have a lot of work to do here.
Right.
The guy said this, Joe, and this was really powerful. He says, listen. You don't have any money. I get it. Just give $5. Give $1. I want you to be part of this, and I want your family to be part of this. That was so powerful, them asking for so little. Everyone gave. They had 2 people that gave over $125,000 that morning. 2.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I emptied my bank account at the time. I didn't have $100,000, but I gave everything because they asked for so little. But I know it was some kind of psychological trick.
Right. Like, if you watch, like, there's a John Oliver episode about mega churches and how corrupt they are, but when he shows examples of them, he shows the worst of the worst. He shows people, like pastors on TV saying, I just bought a private jet. Like, literally, he shows 3 clips of different pastors saying, I bought a private jet. Thank you for your donation. What you don't hear and what you don't see in that episode, or what you don't hear in, like, episodes, like gotcha videos on YouTube about pastors, you don't hear the good... Like the incredibly powerful message telling you to tithe, like what you said, I want you to be part of this. That is so much more compelling, and it makes people who go to church not seem like they are dumb rubes, like watching
Right.
John Oliver.
Well, I think it's an actual way to buy yourself feeling like a better person. Because when I hand money into that, even if whatever I have, when I hand it into that little thing they pass through, or I put it in the envelope, when I put in the envelope, I'm hoping that nobody sees how little it is. I swear, it's only $20 or $40. I'm embarrassed that I'm only putting
crinkle my bills so it looks like more. Like it's
no, I really do, right?
thicker stack, yeah.
So years ago, I was volunteered. You talked about volunteers that I've done. I worked at a food bank. And I did this 2 days a week. I did it for 6 years. And I didn't particularly enjoy it most of the time. And I was talking to one of the high school girls there one day, and it's tough. Work with homeless people, and there'd be conflict with other volunteers. And let's face it, it's 10 hours out of your week every week, and who's got that kind of time? But I did it. And I asked her, this high school girl, she's a valedictorian, really smart kid, and she was a good kid. She's down there volunteering at the church with food bank. She'd been there since I'd been there almost, and she was a little girl. And I go, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? And she says, we don't want to lose our position. We've been volunteering so long, we've gotten promoted, we've gotten more responsibilities, and we don't want to lose that status, that power. This is a 17-year-old kid explaining this to me. And she was dead on. You have a sense of obligation that you need to give, that you need to be there. Of course, the show's going to go on without you, though, Joe. They could replace the president in 30 minutes. What do you mean? One food bank worker?
Right, but that is weirdly part of the helper's high. We've talked about that on other episodes. The idea that you helping, you get status from it. Like you become, the public and the social group around you sees you doing that. And it gives you that status.
My friend Brenda, she's a very successful real estate agent. She's, I think it's with Country Insurance. And she's done this for 30 years. So she has a huge book of business, very successful. And one of the young pastors was talking to her about how their job is important, doing God's work, right? And that it's the most important job in the world. And she stopped him and corrected him. This is a woman in her 60s. And she said, listen, you can't do any God's work without my money. I'm the one paying for all of God's work. And I thought, you know what? She's dead on, because who's paying for the gas,
Right.
It's Brenda with her tithing.
Have you been told by pastors ever that tithing is in the Bible?
Yes.
Did you ever figure out where in the Bible it is?
No, I have not. I haven't. Just take it for it.
Just same with me. I don't want to be like, yes, I'm so smart. I knew this all
It's
along. No, I did not.
Proverbs, yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah.
Psalms or whatever. No.
According to Billy Graham's website, it's 2 Corinthians 9:6-7 supposedly says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly shall also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously shall also reap generously. Each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. I've looked at that, and it nowhere in that phrase does it say tithe.
No matter no matter if it's in Latin, Greek,
sows
Italian.
sparingly, reaps sparingly, sows generously, reaps generously. Each man should give what his heart give, not reluctantly or compulsion. That a cheerful giver, that does not. It doesn't say give to the local mega church. It doesn't say tithe. It doesn't say who to give to. I assume, like a biblical scholar would slap me across the face and say, obviously it's talking about churches or tithing. But yeah, I don't know. I could loosely interpret that as a layman as it just means be generous as a person.
Now there's the 2,000 members mega churches. That's where those are the tiny ones. And those pastors make, I think, around $200,000 plus. Okay, so they make, I would say, CEO income for a nonprofit, right? I think that's fair to say. And they're leaders. They're public speakers. But Joe and I are talking about the people that are absolutely in it, the prosperity preachers, and what their message is you give us your money, and you'll be successful, and your cup will overrunneth. Is that
right?
So you're giving to get, and they preach that, and they parade around town. One of my friends was on Benny Hinn's. He's a real tough Marine, and he was a security guy all his life. He was on Benny Hinn's security team. Now Benny Hinn has 10 full-time security people. That's how many people want to kill this guy. Right? but that's that's with being famous, right? And being a church thing. It's not just for him. What he told me is they used to go to the malls in Beverly Hills, to the malls and the high-end jewelry stores. They would close the store down when he came in because he would buy so much fur coats, jewelry.
It's like a Michael Jackson move.
It's exactly what it was. And he said it wasn't something that happened once a year. It happened weekly. Anytime he went shopping, they would show. So that shows you what kind of money, what he was doing with all that tithing money.
Well, it's funny you liken it to being a CEO because when we start looking at the mega churches, a mega church is defined, as you said, 2,000 members or more. But when we look at who is attending these churches, more than half of all Americans who go to church now go to the largest 10% of churches. So they really have like congealed in the top 10%. It is like Walmart. I'm going to use that phrase from now on, basically, that these mega churches, the largest ones, have become the superstore of churches, and that they have knocked out smaller churches from doing business. And they if you think about half of all Americans, if you take 50% of all churchgoers and you go back to like the 1800s and you re-sprinkle them into smaller local churches, how much good would that do? Like if local churches give more, do more, volunteer more, then you would redistribute that top 50% being crammed into mega churches. And we'll get into whether or not they by their virtue and by their their giving back, how much mega churches actually do contribute back to America.
I want to give you some context here. My grandmother, she's Catholic, and she passed away, but she was in her 80s, and she was volunteered at a small Catholic church in Grand Haven, Michigan. Only 100 people members. Do you know what their tithing was every week, Joe?
What's that?
125 members, so consistent. They had a $65,000 a week tithing.
A week?
Now, yeah. And
Holy
I was
shit.
I was just I don't know if you say horrified, but shocked that and Catholics are good at putting the finger on you, and saying, hey, you better give everybody. So I'm just thinking, I'm doing the math as a small business owner. That church is paid for, right? And then they get 65. I don't know what they do with all that. It goes to the Vatican, of course, most of it, and then gets distributed. But let's just say they're in a profitable pry and they're not paying a cent on taxes on that.
Hold on, I'm gonna do some quick math for fun. Did you say 160 people?
128 people.
Okay, 128 people. So if we take 128 people, multiply by 6,000, because that's approximately, if $60,000 is the average annual income for an American, and then you take 10%, that's 6,000 times 128. It should be $786,000 per year. Like, they are busting way over that.
Right. So they have a high earner who gives a lot, I'm guessing.
Right.
Or a few
Couple,
of them.
yeah.
A few of them.
Okay, a couple of tithing darlings, so we'll... Yeah. Okay, so what are they buying? Like what are those in that Haven Church when they, tithe so darn much? What are they getting back for their money, just as far as like peace of mind? We had in our myths the question, you can't put a price on peace of mind, except we're definitely going to try. So let's compare the feeling of going to a mega church versus a small church, because that's when we talk the peace of mind you get. We actually want to compare what is the experience of a mega church, what is the experience of a mega church as seen through college and scholarly studies, what is the experience of a local church. And so I'm gonna read you the studies, and Todd, you jump in whenever you want and tell me how close this is, because I myself have never been to a mega church. I've never walked through the doors of any church larger than 500. All of my experiences are small Catholic churches in my youth. So this comes from Washington University. Wellman, Corcoran, and Stockley Meyerdirk analyzed 470 interviews of about 16,000 surveys on megachurch members. And the word that came up over and over and over again, contagious. When asked to describe feelings, when asked to describe, emotional experiences, they use the word contagious quite often. They also use the words energized. They said they leave energized. One church member said, quote, "The Holy Spirit goes through the crowd like a football team doing the wave. Never seen that in any other church." So that's, in a nutshell, that's what I could see from studies is
Well, I'll tell you what, the difference between, I grew up in a Presbyterian church, and those churches now are trying to convert to the mega church, but they're about 20 years late. So what they, and we're talking about the standard churches where you wear the robes, you sing hymns, and now it's turned into this kind of rock concert-y, younger people playing guitars, instead of reading out of, singing out of the hymn books, you're singing off of a big stage. A lot of these stages now are $20,000-$30,000, so they rival a low budget Rolling Stones show. They do, and that I want to go back to the mega church I went to, the CCV, Christ Church and that church is in the 15 to 20,000, and they have multiple campuses. I volunteered there, and they were talking about how they make the appearance of their businesses to attract men, because men are likely to bring more family members. They play sports on the screens like Buffalo Wild Wings in the lobby. So they're very in tune to their aesthetics as a bit, and the thing for an hour I think is very powerful. You think, well, why would people care if they're going to go to church? Why not? What's the difference? Hour and a half. It makes a difference, and they're really, really marketing themselves well. They also do this thing. Once you start going there for a little bit, one of the pastors calls you and talks to you like they're an old spiritual friend of yours. Like, it's very, you wouldn't think they'd have time to do that, but they really push the button on getting people through the doors and getting them, we called it plugged in, which plugged in means making friends, volunteering, giving.
Right. You want that rock concert experience, but then on the side, when you have time, have somebody give you a call and be like, "Did you like the concert?"
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, they when they talked to these people doing the surveys, they mentioned, like I said, they had a lot of positive value words. They said, quote, Wellman said, "That's what you see when you go into mega churches. It's people smiling, people were dancing in the aisles." They specifically mentioned that a lot of these mega churches they're becoming sort of like almost non-denominational. Like
Right.
a lot of them veer very far away from, the roots of individual churches.
It does. It gets very motivationally. And that's the thing. You go to an older church, it's almost depressing.
Yeah.
But here it's like a party. It's like a really bad rock concert, a really boring rock concert, but it's still a rock concert, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of energy, enthusiasm. It isn't that you're not there to feel bad, you're there to feel good, you know.
That is so precisely it. So, have you ever been to a Latin mass?
Oh, never. Oh, yeah, I have. It bores you to death. They talk the whole thing. I've been to a Catholic one.
Yeah.
It just
That's
goes
exactly
on
right.
and on. Yeah, they bringing bells and all this symbolism, and oh my goodness, it's just
Right. The old system of church. I had a graphic design teacher who used to tell us that, the reason why churches are so large and there's so much symbolism and there is so much movement and slow sort of like, if you look at a Catholic mass done in Latin, it almost flows like a slow trickle, like a river. And he's like, all of that is designed to make you feel smaller in the house of God. You are supposed to be reverent. But in a mega church, there is unalloyed joy, is the way they described it in this study. It is supposed to be like a drug. If old churches of their denomination are supposed to make you feel penitent and make you rethink your life, mega churches are supposed to make you feel pretty awesome about being you.
that's interesting. I got to go back to CCV, and I've been to a bunch. I've been to the Mars
Yeah.
Church up in Seattle, and I go to a mega church now. The CCV one, and also the thing they did, they had an armed police guard inside and outside the church. That was a very power positive thing, and he was on, not off duty. He was an on duty police officer that they hired, one for inside and one for outside. I went to one of the smaller campuses, and I remember I mentioned to one of the other churchgoers, one of the other volunteers. I said I would like to go for Christmas to the main church, the big show, right? He looked at me, Joe. He said, "Have you lost your mind?" And I was like taken back. I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Do you know how busy it is there on Christmas Day?" He goes, "First of all, there's no way you'd be able to get a parking space. It's impossible. You have to go hours early." He says, "Their nativity scene, they bring in 10 live camels."
Oh my God.
So I don't know what that cost, but that's how the way he said it. They bring in actors from all over the world. They have 10 live camels walking across the stage. So it's $1 million service. It's got to be. So who's paying for that?
Compared to tiny plastic Jesus and a couple of sad plastic camels at my church. Yeah.
With a projection, little, like, what are those little lights? Yeah, no. They got full on costumes sewed by hand. They also
so
at this
crazy.
church had their own music studio, podcast studio. These are separate studios, and their own video studios that they could make real movies. So they would make Christian movies with the pastoral staff and show it to the kids in full production, like they're Warner Brothers.
Right. Yeah, when you talk about plugged in, hitting them with a local call, hitting them with, visual, like video, a concert, a podcast, like that is trying to keep you connected on every single level and entertained on every level. Do they ever reference heaven or hell or like sobriety or judgment in the services you've gone to with the mega churches?
The mega churches are very forgiving. It's all about Jesus, and it's all about you're okay. There is very little guilt. There's a high acceptance. Their acceptance of they hold women in high standard. They hold everyone equally as far as race. So I'm sure there's some politics there. I'm sure different churches, you get different parts of the country. I'm thinking Southwest and Southeast, it might be a little bit different, but up here it's a very tolerant atmosphere. It's not a judgy. You're going to hell. I promise you'll never hear that.
Right.
Only in your head.
So let's kind of break down this into a value, like a actual like number. For the weekend, like if going to a concert every Sunday, having that charge up, having that sort of like energetic experience where it almost feels like you've taken a drug and done the wave at a football concert. what would you put that as? Sort of like, what would you pay for that if it wasn't a church? If it had nothing to do with God, you just went to a social group every week with a couple thousand or 100,000 people, and everybody just had that energy.
I think of that like the gym. People say, "Oh, the gym's $30 a month." I go, "It's $1 a day." You get that much entertainment out of it, you know.
Right.
To answer your question, to me, $60.
Okay.
That's a movie with my wife, right? And maybe some popcorn.
Yeah. That's Ticketmaster in the 90s. Like I'll buy that. Yeah.
It's not today's concerts would be what,
$500.
Yeah.
I think that's about right. I think that number is pretty close. What I would think is if you just take God out of it, just the entertainment, the energy, the performative nature of it. So the spectator worship. Let's talk a little bit about the value of that. How much is the dollar value of you go to a large crowd, all the attendees participate. The congregation is basically a feature, but you don't do as much interaction. Like when you're at a mega church, do you turn to the people in the stands next to you and like connect with them? Like is it like a local church where you have those quiet moments before the service and you're just sort of chatting with the people next to you and trying to get to know them?
Yeah, there's the beginning of every service. Say, just turn to your neighbor and say good morning. See how they are, and then next thing you know, it's just a big love fest. Everyone's hugging, and then finally the pastor has to get everyone to settle down because we won't stop talking to each other, and we're climbing over. Yeah, it's very lovey-dovey. I mean, it's very warm. It is.
Okay.
Yeah. I know you'd be I'd love to see you do it. You'd probably get so uncomfortable. I could see you crawling in your skin right now. All these strangers coming up to you, touching you and stuff.
No, I when I would attend church in my youth, I would just quietly sit there. Like I would go to the pews. I would sit down. If people came to me, I wouldn't stand up or move. I was very awkward.
They even have professional prayers. Like if you're going through something, they'll like, especially every service, at the end of the service, they welcome people up who are going through some kind of crisis or anything. And they bring in like these 30, like, church elder looking people, and they'll go and put their hands on you and pray for you. And so it's a very powerful, emotionally, surrender and support of what you're going through. They'll cry with you, and then they'll drag you backstage. I never know what happens to those people they take backstage. I never ever see them again, but
it's a champagne room.
Beat the shit out of them or something.
I want to be there for the casting call for that. I would love to be like, I want to be like sleazy Hollywood stuff where they like bring in a bunch of elderly people and they're like, no, you don't look compassionate enough. Give me compassion. Give me surrender.
You'll never work in this town again if you can't sell this.
Right.
Kid with cancer. Come on, go.
Somebody's like, I work at Walmart as a greeter right now. I need this job. Okay. So if you go to a large church, you get all of these benefits we're talking about. And Todd has put his figure at about $60 a week. If you go to a smaller church, so the positive, and these are studies that have basically been proven out, regular church attendance is linked with living a few years longer. Attendance reduces anxiety, and for sure, like I tried to disprove this as a agnostic and a relatively a man of science. I tried to, triple and double check to go through as many college studies as I could in the amount of time I was writing this. So it for sure reduces depression rates in children who are 13 to 18 years old. Most of these studies, here's the big caveat, most of these studies point to active community involvement as the biggest benefit, not necessarily the word of God or the religious high that comes from being in a mega church. It is the interaction. When Todd and I are joking about them calling you on the phone afterward, being dragged back, to be individually prayed with, it really is the social aspect of it that brings you the absolute most benefit. It's not the concert high. It's the feeling connected.
Well, I just had this happen with my wife, and she goes to church with me, but what you just said happened. She went there, and one of our neighbors is very educated, works at Intel, PhD, and someone that my wife admires because of her education, her intelligence. And she goes to our church, and we started walking with her to church, and she started taking notes. And then I noticed my wife saw that and said, "Wow, why you take notes?" And she said, "Well, for me, it helps me stay focused." So my wife starts taking notes. Well, I've noticed, and then this woman has introduced her to somebody because she's a little more plugged into the church. Just like fire, just like a match, my wife wants to get plugged in and get involved. And I know it's not based on God, it's based on the community and the people, how she feels. And to me too, I want to spend time with these people. I want to help out. I want to be in their friend group, is what it says to me.
Right. I think that is, if we are sifting through, we're going to get into a lot of the icky, gross, strange, money grubbing things that churches do. But if you want to boil it down to what is the best benefit, your wife is getting it. It is plugging in, getting social, getting involved, becoming part of the community. All of that has pro-social benefits, reduces depression. Like we said, you live longer. And if we want to just absolutely boil it down to the money, like the absolute bottom line of, is it worth it? If you look at the cost of psychotherapy in the U.S., it's $100 to $200 per session per week. The average cost of a tithe in the U.S. is $17 to $200 per week. That is what is reported by most churches.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah. So it's almost the same. Like if you take that middle, $17 to $200 a week for tithe, $100 to $200 a week per session of therapy, you're kind of around the same ballpark, honestly.
They set it up like direct deposit too. Do you know that, right?
I did not know that.
So they set it up, that they'll have like a meeting, and then they get your bank account information. They've got a lot of different ways you can pay by Venmo and PayPal, but they'll do a thing just like a gym membership where let's figure out your tithing and it'll come out weekly. So of course, what weekly is better than monthly bills, right? Or daily,
Yeah.
anything, how us Americans are. It doesn't sound like so much. But it's similar to gyms where they put you on a schedule. You pay, first of all, your attendance goes up, and then you pay more regularly, right, when it's already coming out of your bank account.
Right. If it's automatic, you have to cancel it to make it stop. And
isn't that
you'll
kind of
pay
hard
a
to
lot
do
longer.
with church, too? It's a little harder than canceling the gym.
Right. Yeah, God doesn't get mad at me at the gym if I cancel that. It's just a big dude named Kevin who really wants me to eat better. But you cancel the house of the Lord. That's different. So okay, let's talk. We got the money, success rates. Cognitive behavioral therapy, if you pay for that, is a one-on-one session, has a 50% to 75% chance in treating depression. We don't know the exact percentages of attending church on reducing depression. It is lower than that, but it is consistent and it is across the board, especially when you are young. The youth get the most benefit as far as depression and anxiety go from attending church. After 18, I don't know what happens. Maybe people start questioning everything. But again, a mega church is a 1 on 2,000 session for the actual event, and then the rest of it is how much you plug in. And a local church statistically is a 1 on 50 session where the pastor speaks to 50 of you. And if you participate in the community, like can't stress that enough. The if part, if you just go in and sit like I do and you don't talk to anyone like I do, then you will get as many benefits as I did, which is 0. So you really have to become pro-social.
Now I want to talk about volunteering at a big mega church, because the volunteerism, it is contagious. You do build status. I started doing it because I was single and I just felt uncomfortable at church sitting by myself. I was just kind of lonely, and I didn't know anybody, and you feel kind of like an outcast, right? Because you are, especially a single person in church. But once you start volunteering, I was doing the security work, and I was in charge of doing the background checks. This is very interesting, Joe. So I did all the background checks for the volunteers because we need to know if they've had, sexual problems in the past or kid stuff, whatever, right?
Right.
But this is the problem, Joe. It's church. You have to forgive. So we would get people with some pretty sketchy backgrounds But we can't say no, they can't volunteer. We just have to keep an eye on them.
That's
Hey.
what the background check does? Like, you're
Yeah.
just checking to see who you need to watch closer?
Well, yeah, because you can't say no, you can't volunteer because you have a felony for this, da, da, da. But we would keep Daryl away from the kids if it's a thing about kids, and so we were just aware of those things. When I volunteered at the CCV, they asked me 20. They had an actual thing that you filled out. They had a personality test you took, almost like FBI, but a lot of the questions were based on your sexual history when you were a kid. If you had been molested, they asked you like 20 different times. So they're very aware of keeping an eye on any kind of sexual predator. I just thought that was crazy that they do background checks, but they still have to take everybody.
Right. That's also crazy that they are self-aware enough in the dangers of, like what churches have faced and like the kind of predation that's happened at churches where they would have so many screenings for that. Like that makes sense, but I don't know why I assumed that churches are like blindly going forward with the word of God. Like they wouldn't have their own sort of like lens on that.
Now, another thing that you talked about, people kind of buying into the hype a little too much. Some people can't see the difference between God and the show in these mega churches.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Joe and I have written a lot of sermons. We've written a lot of speeches. We've never written sermons, but we've written a lot of speeches. And I was talking to one of the other volunteers about the pastor's sermon. He's a real great speaker. And I said, wow, he does great structure and this and that and da-da-da. And she goes, no, he doesn't do any of that. She goes, the Holy Spirit writes his sermons. She was dead serious. This is a woman with a bachelor's degree who works as an accountant. You know what I mean? And I thought she was joking. Of course there's structure. Of course they write speeches. There's outlines online. You know what I mean? And I just thought, she goes, no, that God writes them for him, and it just speaks through him. And I was like, okay.
Has she never spoken to a religious scholar? Like, they're better at storytelling than I am, and I specialize in structure. Like, but they work on it, right? They've been doing it all their lives, Right.
From the Bible, they take. I mean, and I don't think that she's the minority. I think she's the majority. They don't connect. They don't do the show and God.
Right. Sorry to do this again, but I'll talk Joseph Campbell again. Famed story professor and like psychologist Joseph Campbell talked about how most religions share a very similar story because it is so well structured. Like, it is built to tell the heroic story of you and also the God figure that is, that everyone's going to pray to. Like,
you have a built-in guide, right?
Right, exactly. Like, yeah, no, I've spoken to religious scholars, and they know more about story structure than I do. Like, they are generally better at public speaking and building a story than most of the professional storytellers in writing.
And I think if you put them up against some of the best motivational speakers, I think Joel Osteen's are very encouraging and inspirational.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he would rival any of those. This whole show started, I didn't tell you, I told him, we were talking about Joel Osteen and the big mega church in Houston, and I said, why don't you Google his car? And it was this ridiculous Ferrari that that looks like a rapper would drive. Right? Joe was like, what?
That's where I started going down the slippery slope of what do mega pastors do with their tithe? Because, like, I saw his car, and then I started seeing private jet. Not Joel Osteen, but like, it almost seems like these pastors, they will literally trade private jets to each other like they're trading cards, like the mega pastors. It's so insane.
Without the airplane that we have that I bought from Tyler Perry, and I didn't pay anywhere. And Tyler's one of the greatest guys. He made that airplane so cheap for me, I couldn't help but buy it.
Well, my question then, okay, all right, but I want to get to the demons because people are very concerned about that comment.
Give me a chance here, Inside Edition. I love your eyes.